Okay, thank you very much. I'm here then to just focus mainly on income inequality and wage inequality, and the results presented here from Divided We Stand, a presentation that was launched in December at the OECD. The work that we did looked mainly at the working age population and in a broader perspective historically. So we looked at the 20 to 30 years before the economic crisis and how was income and wages evolving in the period up to 2008. And we look at the underlying forces behind those changes. And we looked primarily at two things. One is what could explain the changes in wage inequality. And here, Maria already pointed out that this debate about whether it's globalization or technological change or whether changes in institutions that were driving that. So we look closely into that. But we also look at the overall changes in income. So whether this was driven mainly by wages, by capital income, or by changes in the taxes and benefit. And I will also talk a little bit about the policy debate and what kind of policies could be used to prevent this trend in rising inequalities. This has already been discussed. But what we found is that there was a growing trend in inequality, rising inequality across the OECD. And if we look at the household income inequality, in 17 out of 22 OECD countries for which we had data available in long-term series, we saw that income inequality increased. Income inequality increased by about 10% in the span of 20 to 30 years. And it increased in both high and low inequality countries alike. So traditionally, the US and the United Kingdom have been countries with relatively high inequality in the OECD, and there was a high increase in there. For instance, if we look at the US, now the top 10% earn 15 times more than the bottom 10%. But the surprising fact is that this increase in inequality happened also in traditionally low-income inequality countries, such as Germany or Sweden. Particularly in the Nordic countries, there was a high increase, especially in the late decade, the 2000s. If we look at Sweden, the Gini coefficient increased by 6 percentage points, which is quite high. So this is in terms of the trend. And now looking at the factors behind this increase in inequality, so I've already talked about these issues of globalization and technological change. What we saw is that the main driver was technological change. And the reason behind that is that, as it has already been mentioned, is this sort of divide between the high-skilled and the low-skilled workers. The high-skilled workers are reaping the benefits of technological profit, and their wages have been increasing, while the pay of the low-skilled workers has been stagnant in the last 2 decades. In contrast, we did not find a strong effect of globalization, although this we cannot rule out that, of course, because many factors are interlinked, that globalization in turn is affecting other factors, such as technological change itself, or institutions, because we did see also an effect of institutions. In particularly, talking about this issue of deregulation, we did see that deregulation in terms of employment protection legislation was also linked to an increase in inequality. So there's been a change in working conditions driven by this deregulation. The increase of part-time work is also key. We see that part-time work has increased from around 10–11% in the 90s to 16% in the late 2000s, and this is also linked to this increase in inequality. While some of these aspects are good for employment, that means that there are more workers because they are able to work part-time. There's also many underrepresented groups that are working, but this means that at the same time there is more inequality in terms of wages and income. We also see a change in working hours, which I will talk a little bit more in a minute, and taxes and benefits were also behind the explanation of this increase in household income inequality. So I will just focus on this part of the working conditions and the working hours. So I've already talked about the part-timers, that there was an increase in the share of part-timers in total employment. And if we look at inequality among full-time workers, and then we add inequality looking at part-time workers, we see that inequality increases by around 0.5 in terms of the Gini coefficient. And if we look broader in terms of including the self-employed, this increase even further. At the same time, there's been an increase in divide between the low-skilled and the high-skilled workers. So if we look at the top 10% workers or the bottom workers, there's been a divide in hours. We see that workers who earn more, they also work more hours, and they've actually in many countries increased their hours, or the decline has been smaller compared to the workers who earn less, where there's been quite a large decline in the hours they work. At the same time, redistribution became weaker in countries. We see if we look at income inequality, pre-taxes and benefit, it is much higher. And actually, taxes and benefit, they manage to decrease inequality in a society by about a quarter. However, when we look at this, by how much taxes and benefit achieve this reduction in inequality, there's been a trend where they have become less effective at countering this increase in market income inequality. So if in the mid-1980s, taxes and benefit decrease inequality by over 50%, this is now around 20% across the OECD. So in terms of the policy implications of these findings, the message I want you to bring home is that both redistribution but also inclusive employment policies can make a difference here. In terms of redistribution, what we see is that the reason why taxes and benefit became less effective was mainly driven by a change in benefit, a change in eligibility conditions of benefits, particularly in terms of unemployment benefit. So countries can here do much more in terms of targeting their benefits towards low-income households, making sure that this counters this rise in inequality. At the same time, we cannot forget the other part of the balance in terms of taxes. And particularly, there's been this debate about the increase in the top incomes, and the question is there whether there is some margin for the top incomes to pay their fair share of taxes here, particularly to raise revenue to then finance these benefits. However, in this period of economic austerity, but even without the austerity, there cannot be indefinite amount of this increase in benefit. You also need to make sure that more people get into employment, but that you're getting more and better jobs for those people, so that there is that the low-paid jobs become a stepping stone towards better careers and better jobs. And the other thing that we found in our study is that while technological change was driving this increase in inequality, the increase in education and the upskilling of the workforce was a counterbalance to this. And this has already been raised in the discussion about making sure particularly that people at the bottom of the distribution, they get better educational opportunities to counter this increase in inequality. Thank you.